Quick video. Looking for a leak. Came into this shop. Customer said no AC. I hook up my gauges. I have zero AC. The caps were screwed down really tight, like a gorilla put them on. That's your first sign that somebody who doesn't know what they're doing worked on an AC system. Anytime you see over tightened caps, whoever did that doesn't know what they're doing. So second thing, there was a little bubble coming out of this cap, and there was some moisture of oil around the cap. I don't see if you could see the shine of the cap usually going leaking, but somebody was in here. I think it was just a one can person, because this one had dye on it, and don't know if they could get it in there or not. Usually sometimes they deny that they tried to work on it themselves or took it to another shop. The fittings were clean. That's a first. Everything is dusty. Somebody touched it with their hands and the actual fittings are clean. That's your little clue that somebody has been mucking around inside here on the air conditioning. I'm gonna throw some dye in it. Here's the dye I use, and there is nothing better than this. That's one of the reasons I always can tell my cars from other people's cars, because this stuff is just so damn strong and bright compared to the majority of the other brands that is no comparison. You don't debate it. But one thing, people don't like the price of it. Since we got $269 here for this, cheapies will go and find that UV dye that's $30 for a little container or something like that. As my backup dye, because I've been having a harder and harder time to get these big containers, because I literally do a couple thousand vehicles a year, and instead of 10 or 20 or 50 like some shops do. My supplier has these on their shelf, so I'll keep these. They're wrapped in cellophane and sealed, and these will be my emergency backup when I run out of these, and then I use these injectors to put this inside of it. And I actually put this in a vacuum chamber when I do it, and I actually dry out the plastic internals by putting it in one of those big 5-gallon vacuum chamber chops, just to get the moisture out of the oil as I'm pouring it in there. That's going a little extreme. Let's see what else. Oh, so pressure test it. There's the nitrogen. I almost thought that one was out, but it wasn't. So I carry two. I always have a backup nitrogen. And so you can see right now I have 150 psi, and I first did it on the one that I thought was leaking, and so I had this fitting off, and I used my nylog inside the hole of the fitting. Now this is a Ford, and some of the GMs, the ones with the rubber black plug, they always get messed up and they're leaking when guys disconnect them when they're running. They're at like 250 psi, and they always overrun and over tighten all the way down, and so they actually mess up the little valve, and when it pops up, it'll deform at the curve, and you'll see a little lip of rubber sticking up, and it'll leak from there. So I thought this was the leak. So what I do, since I already have this out to protect my O-rings and my fittings and stuff and make a good vacuum seal, I just put it inside the dimple of the hole in the well and use this as my bubble source to look for a leak. So I filled it up to 150 psi using dry nitrogen. After I evacuated it first, I wanted to make sure it's clean. I just have dry nitrogen, because if you have partial refrigerant in there and you're trying to do a leak test, refrigerant expands and contracts, and it'll give you false numbers. It'll expand and contract as the sun hits it or a cold wind comes by and your vehicle sits and cools down after 10-20 minutes. Your numbers will fall because of the refrigerant, because it contracts. So you only want dry nitrogen when you're doing a nitrogen decay test. So now I'm going to go into the startup, so I'll cut this part of the video off from here. That's just a little sample of a good dye. Looking for leaks, and unless you don't have your soap bubbles or something like that, you also could use this and put it inside the cap and look for leaks. And using dry nitrogen only, because you have to explain that part to people. They'll leave, it'll have like 0 psi or 2 psi or 3 or whatever, a small amount, and they'll add dry nitrogen on top of refrigerant, and then they say, well, I let it sit a few hours and I came back and it was a few psi down, so there's a leak somewhere. No, that could have been your refrigerant contracting. Or expanding. If it was in the morning and it's 47 degrees in the morning and you have a few ounces of refrigerant in there and you put dry nitrogen on top of that, and then your shop's busy, you move the vehicle out in the sun, mid-afternoon you come back and you look at your gauges and it's 15 psi or 20 psi higher, and you're going, how's that possible? That was the expansion of the refrigerant. That's why before you do a dry nitrogen pressure decay test, you have to remove all the refrigerant out first. And that's it.